So what I wanted to talk about now is the resurgence of the Jeffrey Epstein story and what it is currently doing to the Trump administration. I did not see this coming. Maybe you all did. I did not. The story is that one of the big things that motivated MAGA and Donald Trump's supporters was QAnon, of course, which was a conspiracy theory based in the idea that there was a cabal of elites in the United States primarily, but they had ties around the world, that were preying on children. They were cannibals, among other things, but they were also sexually abusing and sexually trafficking children. And that cabal in QAnon was supposed to include Democratic politicians. And this is how we got Pizzagate, with the idea that Hillary Clinton had a sex ring under Comet Pizza in Washington, D.C., when Comet Pizza didn't even have a basement. Democratic politicians, business people, Hollywood movie stars, and another group, and I can't remember what they were. I'm sorry. Anyway, the elites in the world. And that fed into the idea that Donald Trump was leading the charge against this cabal, that he was going to protect these children from sexual abuse. And many people, including Simon Rosenberg, who is a Democratic strategist, believed at the time, and I have to say I thought this was true too, although I didn't give a huge amount of thought to it, that this was in part a way to defang the potential for Trump's association with Jeffrey Epstein to really turn people against him, to say, oh, he's the big person out there protecting these girls, when in fact, he had a long history of being accused of sexual assault. And both he and Jeffrey Epstein, who was a convicted sexual abuser, and was facing additional sex charges when he died in jail in 2019. They had been very open about their friendship. They had been filmed together, ogling young girls. Trump had very famously said that that Jeff was a terrific guy, and they both loved beautiful women, and many of them were on the younger side. There were many ways in which Trump seemed to be involved in ways that would not play well. And I'm not talking about the legality or anything else. I'm talking about politics here. But that didn't, to me, that in my life, that was not on my radar screen in the last election. And it turned out that a lot of MAGA voters believed that Trump would, if he were back in office, release the files surrounding Jeffrey Epstein and prove that he had not died by his own hand, that instead he had been murdered. They were very angry with the Biden administration for not producing more material about that. And they expected that Trump would do it. And of course, now Attorney General Pam Bondi promised to do so as soon as she got into office. Kash Patel is now the director of the FBI, and Dan Bongino, both of whom were MAGA influencers, insisted that there was this great conspiracy to cover up what had happened to Epstein and the Epstein files, because the cover-up was protecting Democratic politicians. So as soon as they got into office, if you remember in February, Pam Bondi actually said on the Fox News channel, yeah, client's Epstein list is on my desk right now. And, they promised that they were going to produce this information. Well, last Friday, I think it was, might have been Monday. I don't know. I'm never good at dates like that. The Department of Justice under Pam Bondi released this memo that said, we've looked at all the material. We're not going to release any of it because it shows the sexual abuse of children. And we know now that Epstein killed himself, died by suicide. And here's a video from nearby his cell. By the way, it appears there was another camera by his cell that didn't work at the time. I am not really as up on the Epstein thing as I should be. I'm interested in the larger political story, and I just didn't follow the twists and turns of that whole thing as well as I probably should have. Anyway, they released this thing, and MAGA goes ballistic, just ballistic, and says, what are you talking about? You're not going to release this. You freaking promised us. And after that, on Saturday night, Trump released this really off-the-wall, really long Truth Social post in which he basically said, cut it out. Epstein doesn't matter anymore. Move on. In any case, the client list, the whole Epstein case was written by Democrats, and they're all out to get me, and you got to stop talking about this. Well, that just threw fuel in the fire. And then on Monday, yesterday, the administration put a ton of pressure on influencers to stop talking about the Epstein case. And it seemed like that might happen. And then today, because some of them sort of backed off, and then today it turned out that the film that they released is missing almost 3 minutes in it, which, again, I just can't imagine thinking in this day and age that you could pull something like that off. Apparently they thought they could, but now people have discovered that there is this missing time. I have no idea how one would do that, but they have discovered this. So now MAGA is on fire. And this, I think, is really interesting. My take on it is that this is just the final straw. That is, for all that people, and you've heard me say this a million times, for all that people talk about Trump having this really solid MAGA base, and there are those, certainly those people who are utterly committed to him, they are deeply divided amongst themselves, deeply divided. And if you think about it, there's a wonderful piece today by David Gilbert of Wired. Wired is very good on politics, in which he goes through how MAGA influencers have fallen away from Trump. So he lost Tucker Carlson over bombing Iran. He lost Joe Rogan over his ICE raids that are throwing people in prison who've never had a criminal charge, let alone a criminal conviction. Rogan's upset about that. Laura Loomer was upset about him taking the plane. Remember that, which seems a million years ago, but it wasn't. Taking the plane that somebody gave him. Ben Shapiro turned against him over tariffs. Elon Musk launched a war against him over the budget reconciliation bill. All of those things were places where, in order to take a stand against Trump, those MAGA influencers had then to side with Democrats. So even though they didn't like it, they took stands against it, it really didn't coalesce into an anti-Trump movement. This Epstein thing is homegrown. It's a MAGA thing. It's the Democrats were 100% not out in front on this at all. This fear has been created by MAGA, and it looks to me, again, I will not predict the future, but it looks to me very, very different than the other sorts of off-ramps that have been offered to MAGAs that they wouldn't take because they didn't want to side with libs, right? This one is theirs, and it's not dying down. It's actually increasing. It's getting more and more fervent, to the point that today, House Speaker Mike Johnson, who has been attached, pretty much surgically attached to Trump all along, took the opposite side, said that the administration should release the Epstein files. That's a really big deal. And it's a really big deal as the podcasters, what they call the manosphere podcasters, are just pounding on Trump. They are pounding on him. Because they think that he has betrayed them, and they're making fun of him. You never want him to, if you're trying to rise as a dictator, you never want anyone to make fun of you. And they're really seeming to entrench themselves against him at this point. And that has not been hurt by the fact his own behavior has been extraordinarily erratic. So you may not have seen it over the weekend. He was present for the awarding of the FIFA Cup to the winners this weekend. I think it was Saturday. And he wouldn't leave the stage. It was so weird. I mean, you can look it up. It's all over social media. The team's trying to celebrate, and he's just standing there clapping along, and they try and move him off the stage, and he just won't go. So they end up pushing him to the back. And then it turned out that he essentially has taken the real FIFA Cup and put it in the Oval Office. So they had to give a replica to the football players, what we call soccer. The whole thing was just weird. And one of the things that has made Trump such a powerful political figure is that people thought he was a winner. The minute he becomes a loser, all those people become up for grabs. And this is why I think Johnson turning against him on this issue is so important, that it seems as if there is a recognition that Trump's voters might now be up for grabs. And there certainly seems to be movement both trying to pick them up, but also recognition that if Trump can't command those MAGAs show up for him, if he can't get Joe Rogan and his people on board, and he can't get, Ben Shapiro's people and Elon Musk, who controls X, that creates way more flexibility among the Republicans to move in any direction that they choose to. What they choose to do is not going to be clear. But you have seen recently two of the more moderate Republicans, Tom Tillis of North Carolina and Don Bacon of, I'm going to go with South Dakota, but I could be wrong on that, deciding they're not going to run again because they don't want to handle MAGA. But if that's the case, those sorts of people, not them necessarily, but those sorts of people could become independents and pick up the non-MAGA Republicans and perhaps some Democrats. And that's going to throw an entire new monkey wrench into the system, which, by the way, would utterly mirror what happened to the Republican Party in the late 1890s when they were 100% pro big business. I mean, they were just as they looked very much like, the oligarchical Republicans of 2015. And when they went too far, you got a whole bunch of people switching into a new kind of Republican Party that created the progressive era. And that was people like Theodore Roosevelt. So the movement this week has been just a really, really new moment in MAGA, but also in United States politics in general.